All right, welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin, and today I'm joined by a fairly long-time friend at this point, Greg Mischio. I think I'm saying that right, Mischio?
Yeah. If you're in
Um,
Italy, they would pronounce it Mischio.
Mischio, Greg Mischio. I'm not Italian, so I'll go.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a little bit since we've done an episode together, but I know we recorded at least one before, maybe I think maybe even a few. So
Yeah.
today I'm excited to be diving into thought leadership content. It's something a lot of people talk about, but at the same time, there's ways to do it well, where you actually create influence that drives business, and then there's ways to do it not so well, where you just spend a ton of time howling at the moon, hoping that something sticks. So really excited
Right.
to have you on to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yeah. So I'd love to kick off with just a baseline question to get us in, which is why is thought leadership content valuable for CEOs?
Well, it's interesting as the AI gets bigger on the scene, and we're seeing anybody and everybody using it to create content. We're starting to see a lot more vanilla content. Some people call it water, like AI content's like water. But a lot of it is also very good. But there's just so much more of it, and we're inundated with it. And um, the one thing about learned language models is that they are picking up what everybody else has already written. So this is a real opportunity for you to stand out from the crowd with some thought leadership that's unique to your industry, that's your own unique ideas. And you know, we've been writing content, I know you have, for a long time, and a lot of us have already been producing thought leadership content. But I think that the big difference maker now is going to be, you know, who is delivering it. And we've really been trying to focus on getting the CEOs out there and the executives. Just because now when you, like, if you really want to be a thought leader that has impact, there's usually 4 criteria, and one of them is credibility. So you need to be known within your industry. You need to have some experience in your field. The second is name, title. So are you an executive? Are you of that stature? The third is going to be ideas. Do you have a lot of original ideas and thoughts? And then third, are you prolific? Can you get those ideas out there and get them in front of people? And I don't know. I think a lot of CEOs, you know, we've heard this, that there's like 2 types of CEOs. Some who feel strongly about themselves and don't mind getting out there. And then there's others who are like trying to be more behind the scenes, and they want the team to get out there. But the research that we've seen shows that CEO generated content outperforms your company content in a big way. It's like 2 to 3 times more engagement. And so I guess our approach is, look, if you are one of these invisible CEOs and you're trying to be behind the scenes, you may think you're helping your company, but you actually could be harming it by not using your influence and your position to get out there and share your thought leadership ideas.
Yeah, and if you're putting that content out on LinkedIn specifically, there's a good chance that the CEO just has a much stronger network themselves.
Okay. Yeah.
So then when they're putting that content out there, they're already potentially, depending on the person, well known and respected in the industry overall. They have peers, you know, maybe they're in mastermind or peer groups. They could be on councils, or, you know, they're kind of called something different in every industry, but, you know, they're
Right.
on some kind of boards or whatever. And so they've already got some built-in influence that they've created over years. And so by simply putting it out there, they're going to have a lot easier time building that influence just because of their network compared to people on their team.
Yeah, and I don't know what you think about this, but I always hear like, the sales team trying to figure out who's gonna let them in, and what's their way into an organization, and who's the gatekeeper, and then who's going to be the champion once they get into the organization. And we're always trying to figure out, like, how do we get in front of the CEO? Well, you know a lot of these deals, if you've got a CEO out there, that's going to be the person who is very likely going to, like you just said, they're going to have some stature. They
Yep,
might be able to open those doors that your sales people just can't on their own.
absolutely. Yeah, and so I want to break this down in a couple. You said a bunch of interesting things. So one is, the
It
people who are
happens
more
now and then.
there's, the CEOs who are more out there, and then the ones who are behind the scenes. And I think there's a couple of interesting things to dig into there. One is, um, sometimes the people who are out there just want to get the spotlight, and sometimes they're, maybe their motives aren't the best, and they are just selfish and they want to get attention.
Yeah.
That's, there's always those people out there. But then there's a group of those people who have practiced and learned how to be out there because they've already learned the value. And so some of the people who are behind the scenes, some of it is noble. They want to be humble, they want to lift their team up. But to your point, they actually will lift their team more
Right.
by bringing more attention to what's going on. And the content could be shouting out their team and talking about people on their team and highlighting them could be part of that content. And they're going to be able to do that not just internally, but in a way that actually helps develop their team's career path and, really helps them on that side. But then there's this other piece. And I'm going to kind of say a couple things and let you
Yeah.
respond. And then there's this other piece where, um, the people who are being quiet because they haven't really practiced putting ideas out there, and they haven't really worked on that. And they just assume that the people who are out there are all good at that by nature. And some
Mhm.
people are, right? Some people are just naturally really good at getting out there. They're
Yeah.
naturally really good on camera. But in my experience, far more people are not natural at doing those things, and it takes a lot of practice. And so there's a fear there also of like, well, if I put myself out there, am I going to look stupid? And not wanting to look silly for so then some of it's humility, wanting to lift their team, and some of it's fear of not wanting to actually put themselves out there and take the risk. Um, what's your experience been on kind of those different ideas?
Yeah, I think the biggest, there's a couple of things in there, and the CEOs, the leaders, what's holding them back? What's holding them back from sharing thought leadership content? And I think you're right in that they are not used to doing this. That might not be their skill set. They might be great one-on-one um, relationship builders. They might be great orators. They're not necessarily great writers. They're a little uncertain behind the camera. They haven't done it much. So there's like all these things, the skills they need to create the thought leadership content that they don't have. And I mentioned those 4 items there. And the one I said about being prolific and creating the content, that's the one thing that they don't need to do naturally. They can rely on teams to help them do that, to tell their story, leverage somebody else's storytelling ability and messaging capabilities. And then you just focus on those ideas and let let your team help you funnel those and channel those appropriately.
All right, so let's go into that side a little bit more. And I agree. Like if you're not prolific, some people love to write, they love to do that, and that's an outlet for them. But most people aren't. And so that doesn't have to be a block, right? So if that is the reason you're not doing it, um, keep listening because we're going to talk through some of those things as we go along here. But when it comes to thought leadership content, you have to have thoughts and leadership, right? So you have to actually have ideas that are meaningful. So that's part of it. But I find that a lot of people do end up creating content and nobody's paying any attention. So what types of content have you seen actually lead to business influence?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's in terms of thought leadership, we always, one of the things that Winbound did is, and we still do for our clients, is try and create the sales process with our content, because really, even though we're online, there's a lot of information we're sharing. Ultimately, we're trying to persuade, we're trying to sell. So if you're going to create like a digital twin of your sales team, which we've always talked about doing with our content, we want to use the model we find is get people to know you, like you, and trust you. Hang on just a sec. So if you break down what those three, know, like, trust, what areas should you focus on with each one of those? And I think the know area is pain. What are the pain points that your clients are feeling? And if you're not writing content that's leading with that and discussing that, it's going to be hard for that to show up on the map.
Absolutely.
The other thing is like, and you can look at the Challenger sale for a good example of this, is that people, other CEOs, other leaders, they want to know that you know a lot about their business, and you can come in and you can talk about their business. What they really want is for you to share an insight that they're not aware of. So if you've got insights on how they can improve their business, they'll like you, and that's other kind of content that you want to get out there. And then there's just the trust factor about telling stories about how you've actually used these solutions to help people. And I think, so I would lean into those three principles: know, like, trust, pain, insight, proof. And then the final thing, and especially on LinkedIn, because this is a networking platform, there are people's faces, there's videos, is we kind of think about it this way. You're on the digital platform. Okay. You need to get out there, first of all, to reach these people. So you're on digital, but then you also need an emotional end side of it. You need to tell your personal story so people get to know you and trust you on a personal level. So, and I know you're great, Joseph, about telling about so many of your travels, all the work you've done in Africa and your family. And that just builds a lot of trust. People get to know you and they like you. And so I think the CEOs who can open up and share some of their personal background, and I'm not talking about cringy personal things. I'm talking about, what do you struggle with? What did you go through to get to this point? Sharing those stories can really help make that emotional bond. So then when you're sharing those business insights that maybe will be a little bit drier, even though they're very relevant and helpful, people are a little more, they don't have their guard up as much. They're willing to let you in, and because, they like you, they want to do business with you.
Yeah, I want to dig into that piece a little bit more. It's interesting because I have found, because I've worked a decent amount creating content for people, ghostwriting for people over the years. I'm not doing it quite as much now as I used to, but I have found a lot of hesitancy, especially in B2B, to sharing anything that isn't strictly business. And I do understand to a degree why people would want to do that. And especially people who, I mean, I'm a millennial, I'm like squarely a millennial. So I grew up maybe with that being a little bit more normal. So I can understand people where, they're the people that were in leadership when they were growing up would have never shared anything personal at all. Right. So I understand the hesitancy. But then there is a lot of fear to share anything from a personal standpoint. And I kind of I'm going to say a couple things out loud and just kind of riff on it, but I'd like you to jump in a second and give your perspective. But, especially over the last couple of years, it's like you could put something out there and it could be taken from a political standpoint on one side or the other, and it could cause you trouble, right? Because there's a good chance that 50% of your client base, depending on what industry you're in, is going to think one way and the other people are going to think exactly the opposite, right? So if you put something out there and it's construed a certain way, you, I think there's a fear that you might lose business that way, and the other side of it would just be wanting to protect the privacy of your family, would be another reason.
Yep.
And I think some of it's just fear also of like opening up and being vulnerable about anything. Maybe it shows people might feel like it shows weakness to their team or things like that. So um, I do have some thoughts on this, but I'm curious what you think about how how to overcome that. And if you should, should you overcome that, and how much personal stuff should you actually share?
Well, this business is all about people, and the things in terms of politics, religion. I typically, to me, those are off limits and not relevant to the business discussion. But what is relevant is maybe your personal journey in terms of your business journey and what you've learned along the way, and how you've struggled, and what's affecting uh, you when you're working with other people in your organization, and the stories about how you've dealt with people, and how you've grown. I mean, I think, the whole vulnerability, people make that a link from that to weakness. Like, I'm vulnerable, I'm weak. And it's actually, when you do show some vulnerability, when you do open up a little bit, it's amazing how much stronger that makes you. And it also makes your bond with other people much stronger, because it builds that trust and it builds that connection. The more you retreat from that connection, we are all built for connection. That's what fires off a lot of chemical reactions that make us happy and feel good about ourselves. And the more we retreat and fall into the shame category, the worse you're going to feel about yourself. So I think, I think everything is got to be measured. You've got to feel comfortable doing it. But the more you do it and the more you see people responding, the stronger it'll make you feel, and the stronger your online presence will be.
Yeah, and to build on what you're saying there, when it comes to doing business, especially in the B2B world where your business reputation is on the line, right? This isn't buying a $30 shirt at Kohl's, and or whatever, or even like you're not a car salesperson trying to sell a $10,000 car to somebody one time and then move on to the next person. This is very reputation. Usually your reputation precedes you big time when you're
Right.
making a B2B sale, and so trust is huge, because it's the difference between somebody coming in and nitpicking every single line item on a deal versus going, hey, look, I know that you actually understand what's going on, and I trust that you're going to do what you need to do to get this done, right? And it goes beyond the contract. I don't want to go too far down this route, but contracts are really only as good as one party's willingness to take it to court, right? And so, especially for small businesses, let's be real. If you have a contract with somebody and they say, screw you, your chances of being able to recoup that money without spending more than that amount to get it are extremely low. So,
Right.
whether you realize it or not, trust is probably more important than maybe even you realize it is, right? So,
Yeah.
anyway, saying that whole tangent to say, um, a huge differentiator, in my opinion, moving forward is going to be the human element connection, because most of the other differentiators are becoming more flat. Like if we
Mhm.
thought the internet made the world flat, AI is making the world way more flat. So
Yeah.
all of those advantages of your people are smarter, your tasks are better, your processes are better. Well, AI is being trained on the same processes or better processes in a lot of cases, and you're going to be able to be deploying AI agents to do a lot of the stuff that used to be a competitive advantage. So people actually trusting you as an individual and your ability to be able to build that personal connection, in my opinion, is going to be even more important than it was before. And it was still way more important than what a lot of people gave it credit for. But I
Yeah.
think it's even more important. So anyway, the whole point of saying all of that is, to me, adding some personality, some of your own thoughts and ideas, even if they're somewhat controversial or you think they are, and then adding some about your personal life. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but maybe it's just posting a picture of fishing with your grandson and talking about that. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff goes
Yeah.
such a long way for people to go, oh, this person's a human.
Yeah.
This isn't just them throwing something into ChatGPT and pumping it out. This is something that's like an actual person who has a real life, and I can trust them as a person.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great point. It's like it's those little things in life, those little occurrences that, first of all, they're easier to write about, right? So, like you said, I went fishing and took my grandson, and we just talked, and it was so great to get away. And that's a very specific story and a very specific thing that you're talking about. It's easier to write about, and people can relate to that, and they pick up on those small stories, and those things stick with you, and you don't have to tell some dramatic story about recovering from addiction, or when you went bankrupt. It doesn't need to be that way. We're just talking about just sharing, opening up some things that happen with other people and make you human. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, and just to illustrate that point, I don't know if did you see the Nike ad um, with Scotty Scheffler from this week,
No.
where so it was great. So I'm not going to do it justice because I can't remember it exactly, but it basically talked about being being a champion or a winner, and it's a picture of him with his son on the golf course, his young son, and then the next picture was and winning another Open is nice to have too, basically. So
Yeah.
the ad
Yeah.
was the being a real champion is being there for his son and making that connection, and then the rest of it is gravy, right? And that
Right.
says something about Scotty Scheffler and his beliefs and who he is as a person, and speaks to his integrity, and to me makes him much more likable than the golf guy who's gonna be pursuing all kinds of other stuff that uh, that I might not be as excited about.
Yeah, exactly. And
So it
it
doesn't have to be anything crazy.
even makes him more amazing, because he is a dad, right? He is like you, and he is like me, and he has achieved this level of success. That makes the story even more incredible.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be something super crazy either, is the
No.
point. Like it's something as simple as that. And
Yeah.
one little picture, I mean, it's literally probably this is what amazing copywriting and an amazing campaign can do, but it's a couple words and two pictures, and it illustrates so much that makes me as a human want to connect with Scotty Scheffler far more than I ever have in the past, just from a couple words. And what we're talking about has the power to do that for you on as a CEO of a company.
Well, and here's that point too, Joseph. I think that is important about your own life. You're in your nobody knows it more than you do, but you don't always realize how important some things are that have happened to you. And as if you're talking, I've so many times I've talked to clients as we're trying to come up with ideas, and we'll talk about things that have happened to them, and they'll just bring stuff up like that casually, what they did. And the storyteller will make that connection that they might not be. So if you're
Mm.
working with somebody, they'll say that is amazing, and they're like, well, everybody knows about that, or that's not such a big deal. And it's like, no, it is. And sometimes it takes an outside perspective to help you realize that, and then bring that to life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and before we move on from this topic, one other practical thing that somebody was uh, shared the other day. I don't know if you've heard of Eva Daniel. She's a speech coach. She's really amazing. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn, check
Okay.
out Eva Daniel.
All right.
Daniel, she's awesome. But she said two things that really stuck out to me recently. One is I tend to want to talk about the stories in my life that are exceptional, that are totally different, because to me that's the more interesting story.
Yeah.
But she was saying, look, if you have a story that's super interesting but people can't relate to it at all because it's totally different than their experience, and you
Uh,
have a story that's extremely relatable and somewhat normal, it actually tends to get a much better result when you focus on the thing that everybody else can relate to.
Yeah.
And that was really helpful for me because I'm always going, well, what's the super interesting story, rather than realizing that some of the normal things that happen in life are the most relatable. And as a CEO,
It's really
one of
good.
the things you're going to have a hard time doing is having even the people on your team be able to relate to you. And so it doesn't have to be some crazy story. It could
Yeah.
be something very simple. Maybe it's like, I got fired from my first 3 jobs,
Yeah.
and here's why.
Yeah.
And here's the things that I changed in my life and that I've really seen make a huge difference in what I look for when I'm hiring people or when I get feedback or whatever. That would be really relatable for people compared to, I made $500,000 last year and here's the boat I went and bought with it.
That is such a good point. I really like that.
And then last thing, it was actually she didn't say this, but it was in a class that that she was teaching, was about create a story log, and just every day make a note if anything happened that just stuck out to you. It doesn't have to be anything exceptional. Again, like, what's something that happened? Do you have somebody come in and replace your dishwasher and something stuck out to you about it? And then just make a note. And then if you do that consistently, then you're going to have a whole bank of things to go to when you go to write a post or you go to give a speech or whatever, instead of sitting down and going, oh, what are the most interesting 5 things that happened to me this year or in my life or my career? Instead, you're going, hey, here's 3 things that happened to me last week that I could use to talk about. So anyway, I thought those are some practical things to help bring some of those personal stories in.
I don't know if you remember this, and I won't quite do this justice, but there was a Seinfeld episode where I think it was Kramer was selling his stories. So he had stories, either he was selling them or he was buying them. And he's like these funny stories, and he would sell it so people could take them and then, tell them. And the only reason I bring that up is I think sometimes, like, I'll put something out where I'll talk about somebody else's story and how it actually moved me or affected me. So like the other day I posted about a scene from The Bear and the TV show The Bear, and a particular scene and an exchange of dialogue that just hit me like that. And I just talked about it. So yeah, those little stories that are relatable, and they always don't have to be your own story too.
That's such a great point. All right, so we could keep going on forever, and there was a couple other things I put in here, but I think I'd really love to just round this out with, there's a CEO or really anybody who's listening in and they go, okay, maybe I want to start creating some thought leadership content, but I'm feeling really overwhelmed of where to start. So if somebody's going to sit down tomorrow and they're going to time block 30 minutes to start working on creating some content or thinking through thought leadership content, what should they spend that 30 minutes doing?
So there's a great book called Every Book is a Startup, and it was written by this guy who said, when we think about content, we think about, like, you're almost thinking about thought leadership content like you're writing a book, right? And what are you going to write that book about? And he's always like, write a book about a problem that needs to be solved, that you're going to solve. And you are a CEO, you've made it, or an executive, you made it to a certain level by solving problems and demonstrating that you know what to do to help people. So I would start out, again, know, like, trust, pain, insight, proof. Start out with who you talking to, who you trying to reach, what is their big problem. Find out what that is and just brainstorm that list. And it's amazing when you start out there and you think about who you're writing to and who you're helping, the topics that you can then come up with how to solve that problem. That's where I would start.
Love that. Yeah, that's super, super practical. Well, let me ask you one more thing then. Like, should you spend more time chopping the tree or sharpening your axe? So let's say that legitimately somebody's going to take 30 minutes tomorrow and then, they're going to dedicate 30 more minutes next week. Would you recommend that first 30 minutes just because I want to make this as super practical as possible. They, take what you just said and they sit down and they kind of map out a couple different ideas and they spend that 30 minutes planning. And then maybe the next time they spend 30 minutes, they're actually writing content. Or would you recommend just like, hey, just since you're just getting started at this, take one idea, whatever the first thing is that comes to your mind, and just like write a post and publish it? Which way would you recommend that somebody goes if they legitimately are sitting down tomorrow for 30 minutes?
I mean, I think I would start out with a little bit of direction. There's a lot to be said for getting too detailed in your plan. I've ghostwritten a couple books, and what the beauty of it was and the process was, we would just get in there, and I've written some fiction too this way, and just write and write, and the story materializes before you. There's an organic process to it where you're gonna, as Stephen King says, you'll teach yourself some things along the process. That's the beauty of writing.
Yeah.
However, you do need a starting point, and you do need to think about where you're headed. Now, how you get there from A to B is going to be the fun. But if you don't know where you're going, it could get a little frustrating. And at some point you're just like, I'm wandering aimlessly through the woods.
So it sounds like spend your first 30 minutes planning and then your next 30 minutes actually writing some content. Maybe get it out there.
Yeah. It might be a very brief 10-minute planning session. Who knows? You might really know that stuff's already, you've been kicking it around in your head. But I would start out with broad stroke, and then just go. Yeah.
One other cool thing that I've done recently, and then I'll pass it back over to you to share a little bit about what you're up to and where people can find you. But one thing I've done recently, because I've done a lot of scripting and a lot of writing, but I tend to open process more, or I just am in my head and like crunch something around for a long time. So I've started while I'm driving or I'm walking or something, just recording a voice note where I totally just say everything out in as whatever order, and then maybe I'll go back and forth, where I'm thinking through these ideas. And then this is where an area where I have used ChatGPT where it's been super helpful. Then I'll just take the transcript from that, which on your iPhone, it'll create, if you use like a voice notes app or whatever, it just has it in there. And I'll copy and paste that into ChatGPT and just say, hey, I'm going to do a 1-minute video, outline a script for me based on what I talked about, or outline a post or whatever. Yeah. And doesn't get it 100% there by any means, but it does a pretty good job at taking a 10-minute mind dump and breaking it down into like a blog outline or, whatever. And it's really helped me to then structure those ideas more effectively. So when I go to sit down to write, I've already talked it out. I have an outline, and then I'm actually writing instead of, trying to parse all that out.
Yeah, I think everybody is got their methodology or starting to develop it with the AI tools. I find, this has been helpful for me because I'm a writer, and so the craft of it, I can get a little obsessive on it in terms of that first draft will come out fast, and then the fine tuning and getting meticulous with the words takes me a long time. What I like to do is I get that first draft out fast, and just like you did, you do it verbally, I'll do it in writing, and then I'll put it in a chat GPT and I'll say, clean it up and give me any clarity, suggestions on clarity, and typos and things like that, but keep my voice. That's really important because it will change your voice and you will become one of the masses. And boy, that process has really worked nicely for me. And now I'm able to get really good, I feel, content I'm comfortable with and is true to me, and produce it quickly, because then it's, the proofing is done, and that hard work of the polish and the fine tuning is done for me.
Yeah. I love that. All right, Greg, we talked for 35 minutes. Really good stuff, but we could keep going for a long time. But if somebody's going, hey, I like the idea, I want to create some content, I only have 30 minutes a week or 20 minutes a week or whatever, don't really have very much time to invest. I need some help to, I need that team you're talking about to be more prolific. I need help crafting those stories and working through that. Um, how can they find out more about you and what you're up to?
Sure. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and just DM me, and love to hear from you. We've got a product or a service that we've rolled out, and we're really excited about it. We've like I said, I've ghostwritten books before, and I've also done a ton of thought leadership content, blog posts, and micro posts. What we've done is a service called Bookbound. And what we'll do is ghostwrite for CEOs and executives that ongoing content to help you build the audience, that micro content we're talking about. And then after a period of, 21 months or so, we're going to compile it into the ultimate authority builder, a book. And so
Oh, I love that.
it's something very different. We haven't really run across many people doing it, but it's something we're really excited about, and love to talk to somebody if you're interested in not only getting online, but trying to build a bigger picture and get your bigger vision together. People love that cohesive idea of these small posts all leading to something bigger.
That is a brilliant way to do it, because if you just sit down and you write a book, it can take a lot of money, marketing effort to actually get people to know that it exists and to get to it, right? So if you haven't been building that personal brand, you haven't been building thought leadership over 2 years, chances are you're going to publish it and either spend a couple $100,000 or nobody's going to see it, or not that many. But when you publish a book and people are there to read it, to your point, it's a total game changer in your authority in whatever space you're in.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Awesome. Well, Greg, it's always great getting a chance to chat with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, Joseph. Great to chat with you again.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.